All right, good morning, everybody. It is Jay again, and it is getting hot here, guys. It is getting hot, hot, hot. We are experiencing probably the hottest heat wave or the hottest time that since I've been doing this, basically. Since I've been growing fruit trees, this is probably the hottest summer that we have had. And coming from the coolest spring that we've ever had. And I'll tell you guys, that is a big detriment to fruit trees. They don't like to go from extreme cold to extreme hot to extreme cold again, and that's pretty much the valley. Let's call that Arizona, or let's call that Phoenix gardening. Basically, we garden with a light switch. It's either hot or cold, guys. We don't have spring or fall. Okay, so it's either hot or cold here. So what are we going to be talking about today? We are going to be discussing a subject that comes up quite a bit, actually, and we're just going to kind of get into it. I'm going to see if I can answer some questions on this and solve some problems and kind of give you guys my opinion on what I think about this subject. And today's subject is going to be is buying the biggest fruit tree you can afford the best way to go. So basically, is bigger or better in this scenario? Is it better to buy larger pre-established trees, or is it better to start from younger plants and kind of let them grow up into your yard and kind of get acclimated as you go? And so let's as I'm kind of walking around the tropical jungle today in 119 degrees, let's discuss this. And I'll tell you, the answer to the question is, of course, the answer to every question in gardening or permaculture, and that is, it depends. All right, so is bigger better? Is it better to buy a bigger, more established tree, something in a larger pot, say maybe like a 25-gallon pot, versus buying a small tree, something that's going to be in a 5-gallon container? And let's talk about those, and let's talk about the types of trees that we are also growing here in Arizona, guys, because there are basically two distinct classes of trees that we are growing here in Phoenix, Arizona. Let's call them the full sun trees, right? Full sun trees, these require pretty much full sun all year long, no matter what the conditions are, whether it's hot, cold, dry, wet, it doesn't matter. Certain trees need full sun, and they do not play well in the shade at all whatsoever. A good example are the ones that I'm under right now, which are these two pecan trees. These two pecan trees, they don't mind the heat or the cold, and actually they're there to kind of help other plants that are near them. For instance, the mangoes that are sitting right below it, right? Getting some nice cool shade also. But you also have to remember that eventually, even these tropicals, they need to get to the full sun. So you might be able to establish them when they're a little bit smaller, when it's cooler and they're in the shade. But eventually, you guys have to keep in mind that eventually all fruit trees are going to have to reach the full sun. So you see in the background here, we've got some of these mangoes that are getting a lot taller, and now they're starting to reach out into the full sun, and they're acting as the tree next to them, like the pecan. So you've got a pecan right next to a mango, both in the full sun. These get quite a bit as the day goes by, because there's no trees that are actually shading these trees now. Now you can see that the pecan was planned so that it shades the mangoes. Okay, so this is very, very important, this first part we're talking about. And that's because you're classifying the trees into two groups. You're classifying them into tropical trees, and let's call them full sun trees. Okay, we've got two different groups. So now that we've sort of established those two groups of trees, let's talk about sizes and why you would want to buy certain things at a certain size, and keep in mind those two groups of plants. Okay, so now that we've set our parameters of our plants, let's call it our full sun trees like our figs and apples and stone fruit. Now that we sort of set those parameters, let's talk about the trees, okay? So let's call these full sun trees. So full sun trees, I guess it really, let's classify them in where they came from or where they were grown and how were they grown to get to such a large size, or is it a smaller tree in a smaller pot? Okay guys, so let's first think about where these would be grown to a large size. Okay, so when it comes to full sun trees, I can tell you probably 99% bet that plant was grown here locally. That plant was grown here in Arizona. And what does that include? That includes, of course, all your citrus, a lot of your mulberries, figs, apples, stone fruit, pears, pomegranates, a lot of this type of tree, okay? A lot of these type of trees. A lot of these are grown here locally, okay? Because they can take the sun and the heat, okay? They can be parked out in the full sun at pretty much any nursery. I've got them out here in the full sun all summer long, right? So now they're adapting and now they're acclimating and now they're growing to attain these larger sizes. Let me back up here to this mulberry. Got a 25-gallon mulberry, right, which supposedly can't be grown in pots. Well, you see here one that's going on the 15-foot mark here, sitting in the full sun, growing in a pot. So it's a lot easier for people that are here to grow these type of plants, right? These are not tricky. There's nothing really tricky about these plants other than time. These require time in order to get a little bit larger, okay? So really all a nursery owner has to do is just kind of hold on to these trees and kind of grow them out into the full sun, and eventually they'll be a lot larger for people to purchase, right? So in that case, I would have no problem buying some larger, more established trees in this category of trees, because it's a safe bet that these plants have not been imported big, okay? They were grown here and then they grew big here, right? So when you go to drop like a 25-gallon fig in the ground that was grown here, it has no problem. It can just kind of take off. The opposite is going to be true on a full sun plant if you've got a smaller pot or a smaller tree. Okay, so smaller trees, let's call them smaller full sun trees, like all these 5-gallon citrus here. You can see that these all look incredible today, but it's the fact that they're over here in a little bit of shade, right? So as they are a younger tree, like a little 5-gallon tree, they don't have a very big root system yet, and they're not established in the ground yet, because remember, your establishment is going to come from your root size. So if you're buying a 5-gallon bucket and it's a full sun tree, then you're going to be watering this thing basically every day, because that pot is so small that it's going to dry out, whether it be in a pot or in the ground, guys. It doesn't matter. It's the root ball. It has a very small root ball, okay? And it's going to be in the full sun, because remember, it's going to be a full sun tree, right? So what happens is a lot of these smaller ones, they just cook to death. They cannot handle the full sun of the larger trees that the larger trees can handle, right? So full sun, so if you're going to get full sun trees, let's call them, you know, remember your citrus, those type of trees. If you're going to get those type of trees, as they're a younger tree, let's call them, say, under 6 foot tall. If they're under 6 foot tall, they're still a little baby tree, and you have to kind of treat them like you would say a younger tropical, and you want to kind of keep them a little bit shaded and a little bit cooler until they become a larger tree. I mean, you want your leaves looking like this in the summer. You want them looking nice and green and healthy, right? So I can guarantee you, if these small plants were just right out here, another 20 feet away, they would be absolutely cooked and fried and burnt, because they are a small plant that is getting established into a larger fruit tree, okay? And then eventually you'll start getting fruit off of them, okay? So what does this boil down to? So this boils down to, depending on what size you're buying, and that depends on your budget, is where you place those trees, and when you place those trees is very important. So this may be a full sun plant, but you're not going to plant this plant in the middle of the summer in the full sun and expect it to look very good. Now, could you plant one of the bigger, more established ones in the full sun in the middle of the summer? Well, absolutely you can, because other than that, they're sitting in pots. So they're sitting in pots. So the next best thing for them obviously would be to be put into the ground where their root system is cool and you don't have to water them quite so much, okay? So the smaller full sun plants, timing is critical. You'd want to plant those in the spring and in the fall, and you'd want to shade them in the summertime, and you would want to cover them in the wintertime, because these small little trees, especially your full sun ones, are going to freeze or burn up. The bigger ones are not going to go through that. So I don't like selling the smaller full sun trees, because nobody has the correct yard, and they're going to dump these little guys right out in the open sun because they don't have any shade or anything established yet, right? So on those type properties where you've got pretty much full sun or new build, would I go with one of these smaller ones? No, absolutely I would not. I would go with one of these larger ones, right? So timing and budget have a little bit to do with this, right? It's not just, oh, hey, I want to go get the biggest tree I can get, right? And remember, that's not always the best case, because it depends on where it grew big. Did it grow big here in Arizona, or did it grow big in Florida or one of the other states? And did it get established in the same mannerism that I'm showing you right here, right? So now you take a larger plant that might be in the full sun in Florida, and you try to bring it here, you're gonna cook it and lose it really fast, okay? So people trying to cheat, I know they want to try to cheat and get to the larger tropical trees so they can get fruit quicker, but they're not realizing that that tropical tree did not grow big here. It grew big somewhere else, namely Florida, where it's a lot nicer and they have the opposite conditions we have, right? So instead of growing a lot of these full sun plants, they can grow a lot of the tropical trees, like mangoes and all your tropicals, your guavas, your star fruits, all those trees can grow easily there because they have the humidity levels. We do not have those humidity levels, okay? Okay, so when buying, let's switch over and let's start to talk a little bit about the tropicals, since we are standing right here next to a large mango, and I actually have quite a few big mangoes now. Like getting in the forest here, they're getting big. Some of these are 2-story now. So even the grafted mangoes, you know, which we were told weren't going to grow that big here. Well, they absolutely do. They do grow big here. Okay, it just takes time to establish those type of plants. And by time, I mean years. I mean many years it takes to establish a tropical tree. Okay, that is not going to be established in 1 season or 2 seasons or 3 or even 4 maybe. And keep in mind, what do you have during the middle of that? You're going to have a whole bunch of summers, and you're going to have a whole bunch of winters also, right? So tropical plants, tropical trees, they fall into a kind of a different classification in the fact that if you buy larger tropical trees, you want to see if you can find someone here that is growing them bigger here so that they are established here and they won't melt or something go wrong with them. So this is a guava here. This happens to be a Indian white guava, and we grow a lot of these here. So now when you plant the larger tropical trees, they won't go through that shock, basically, where you would be planting them out in the full sun. Okay, so I would say first is you need to find local nurseries, guys. You guys need to find places here like myself and many others that grow the plants here, and they grow them large here, right? So that you can have a chance of buying something that's a little bit larger, and you don't have to wait for fruit, okay? But that's a big distinction between a lot of the nurseries here that import a lot of these trees and bring them in. Either the full sun trees, they all come in from California, right? And you got all the tropical trees coming in from Florida, right? So it makes a difference on what kind of tree it is that you are planting, okay? So like I said, smaller full sun trees, kind of shaded a little bit. Larger full sun trees are going to be out in the sun. It's going to be the same with the tropicals, basically, right? You're going to have the smaller tropicals. Like over here, we've got some sapotes, some chiku sapotes, right? So they're smaller plants. They're back here where it's a little bit shadier and a little bit cooler. Back here with the with the citrus, because I plan on growing all of these big and establishing them here, okay? So you have two choices really as far as your tropical trees grow, and really you're not gonna like either one of them, but that's just the nature of the beast, guys. That's just part of buying tropical trees. Less people grow them here, okay? Or not a lot of people grow them here. Most of them are brought in from other states because they grow quicker there, okay? It's not necessarily a bad business model, okay? I mean, you get plants really big somewhere else and you bring them in, but the problem with that is those trees are acclimated to where they grew big, right? So for instance, if you have a big loquat or a big starfruit or a big mango and you're buying it huge, I get the instant gratification part of it, okay, because you're getting something huge and you think it's going to be a little bit more established and a little bit better off, you know, for a summer or winter, but that's just not the case. Now, if it had been grown here that big, which rarely happens, okay, guys, because the conditions are not good here. That's why they're better off in the ground and not grown bigger as tropicals, or more of us would have tropical trees here if they were easy, right? So people have to do what they can do to get you to get you trees, really. And there's different ways of doing that. You can either import them, you know, from another nursery that grows them. You can import them, or you can grow them yourself here several ways. One would be either taking seeds from the fruit of the trees here and then growing them into other trees, which are now a lot more established because you've got that generational information that's going into the plant. So a really good example of that is I do that with pretty much every single Suriname cherry that I see. Every single Suriname cherry that I see, I take the fruit off of them. I enjoy the fruit, and then I plant the seeds from the trees, which are what all these are, and man, they just look amazing, right? So not only are these second generation tropical trees, right, but these are established and look really good, and are actually growing here, being acclimated to the valley, so that when people get these plants, they don't go through any shock at all whatsoever, because they are basically, let's call it a native plant at that point, right? Man, look at all these. They all just look superb, right? So that's one way you can do things, is you can take things from trees that are already established in your yard. Another good example I'm standing right next to are these mulberries. So these mulberries are all from cuttings. Man, they look good. These are all from cuttings or air layers. So that's how I propagate a lot of the mulberries here, so that these are also second generation. And I do that with pretty much every fruit tree. So for instance, these are pomegranate cuttings. You can see that these were cut from local pomegranates, my pomegranates, right? And then I take and I grow new plants off of those that are not only established to Arizona, but it also gives me a chance to propagate fruit that I like, because I've tried basically every fruit that is out there, every pomegranate. So it's just, now I'm just propagating the ones that are not only delicious, but grow well here. You would think all pomegranates are the same, right? Yep, we get that a lot. Oh, pomegranates and figs are the same. Just throw them all out there in the full sun and let them do what they want to do. Not realizing that the more delicious varieties are the more sensitive trees, and that's why you're not getting a lot of those varieties, right? So same with mangoes. Same with mangoes. I find that the locally grown stuff, these are all seedlings here. The locally grown stuff just does 100 times better as far as tropical trees go. And it just makes sense, guys. I mean, they're grown here. So what do you really expect them to do? Okay? So going back to our main subject matter here, what do I think is better for you guys as far as what you're trying to attain? Well, I would say if you're getting full sun tree, first you need to figure out where these plants are coming from, okay? So figure out if they're grown there or if they're brought in, because that's going to make a huge difference on where you buy your plants, okay? So that's number one. Find a place that grows things that are established if you're not wanting to grow them yourself, you know? No problem with that. Just grow some things yourself. Okay? So, full sun trees, I would buy bigger. Okay? I would buy bigger, more established. They're going to have a bigger root system on them. They're going to be in 25-gallon pots, typically, or 15-gallon pots, one of the two, right? And this size, sitting out here on the concrete, I mean, these apples are just getting blasted on, but that's actually what you want. If you shade these or take too much care of these over the summertime, then when somebody gets one of these trees, it's just going to instantly torch, okay? You can't grow them under shade, okay? You got to give these things the sun that they require. And yeah, they may burn sometimes, but remember, that has to do with your pot size and your root system on your trees, right? They should be able to take this heat. I mean, it's 118 or 119 today. It's just brutal. Okay, and these things are doing pretty good out here considering it's been that hot, and they're on concrete and they're in pots and they're just getting hose water, right? So you got all those factors sort of working against them, yet they look great. A lot of these look just as good or better than some places that are, say, flood irrigated or have more water. I mean, those places should look killer. Right? So even the stuff in pots, guys, in pots. Looks pretty good. So is bigger better? To answer the question, once again, it depends. Like I said, if you're buying the smaller fruit trees, grow them like a nursery does. Kind of keep them in the shade where it's a little bit cooler. Grow them maybe in a pot until they're a little bit of a larger size. I like them to be about 6 foot tall before I stick anything in the ground. Anything, I don't care what it is. Figs, mulberries, mango trees, it doesn't matter. 6 foot's sort of my gauge on when plants are going to go in the ground. So when I plant bigger, let's call them the full sun trees, yes, I would put those in. Those are going to do better for most people, because most people aren't going to get out there and water this little tiny plant as much as it's required, nor can it drink as much as required because it's a small little plant, right? So bigger plants can soak up more water and they can go further in between waterings. That's the advantage of a bigger tree, right? Okay, now tropicals. So tropicals, what would I buy? Well, for most people, or the average person, let's call it 99% of you, it's going to be the smaller to medium-sized tropical trees. Okay, a lot of the larger tropical trees are going to be grown in Florida. Okay, because there's no way for people to attain those sizes here that rapidly. They're slow. Tropical fruit trees are very, very, very slow. They don't grow 6 to 20 feet like other full sun trees do. But will they eventually get big and be able to handle the full sun? Well, of course they will be, because like I said before, eventually you're going to have it for your larger trees, like this mango here. He's getting on up there, guys. He's on up there to the probably 15-foot mark, and he is in the full sun. He gets a lot of sun, a lot of morning sun. And I have, like I said, quite a few of these that just, they extend all the way down, really. The mangoes especially, because that is my favorite fruit, and that is also one that I have back here. Okay. So yeah, when you're buying these larger tropical trees, I know it's sexy. Trust me, I know. I bought them. Okay. And you just want instant gratification, and you want to say, I've got a big old mango tree that's already producing mangoes, right? But unfortunately, this is one where you're going to have to prove yourself on this one, because in order to get them this big and full of fruit, you're going to have to, it's going to take some work to get them this big. They're not going to, you can't sink in an instant mango tree and be like, okay, cool, here we go. Because here's what's going to happen to that larger tree. I can tell you exactly what's going to happen. Over the next 3 years, it's going to look terrible. It's going to burn. It's going to lose leaves. It's going to be sort of yellow and kind of sickly looking, right? And you're going to throw everything at it, including the kitchen sink, you know, trying to figure out what is wrong with this tree. Is it the soil? Is it the acidity of the soil? Is it compost versus native soil? Am I watering it enough? Does it need enough shade, right? You're going to throw all these things at it. And really the thing to throw at it is two things. One, every variety of mango is not the same, of course, right? Just like every variety of every other tree is not the same. So there are some mangoes that are a lot more successful than others. So one, obviously, would be choosing the correct varieties for your area. Keeping in mind that it's not a blanket statement of like, yeah, mangoes will grow here, meaning every one of them is going to grow here and look good and produce fruit and look amazing all year long. Not the case. They are varietal, just like any other plant is, right? And some are going to give you mangoes easy, right? Like this Glen. And then some you're just going to struggle on, like that coconut cream over there. And it has to do with the shape of the tree, you know. The Glens are nice upright trees. The coconut cream are a weeping tree. So you have to know your varieties also, and which ones are going to work well and which ones aren't. And by putting in over 100 mango trees here on the property, well, I've been able to figure out which ones do good and which ones do not. Just like every other fruit tree here. Okay? Some are just better than others. So yeah, that's coming from me. So coming from me, would I try to put in one of these big old trees, you know, like a mango or a loquat or a star fruit or an avocado, and just call it good? Am I going to take off to the races? Well, no, 99% of you are not going to, okay? Because that tree grew in very specific environments that you do not have. You do not have flood irrigation. I do not either. This is a hose. You do not have flood irrigation. You do not have the proper soils and the earthworms and the the correct things to get these things established, okay? So in that case, I would say most people are going to have to go through that learning curve anyway. So you might as well start with something that's either smaller or medium and try to get it to this size, because I'll tell you guys, a smaller or medium mango is going to go through less stress than putting in a larger one and trying to get that instant gratification or that instant clout on having that big old fruit tree in your yard. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. I wish it did. Money cannot buy this one. Unfortunately, this is one of those where time and experience is on your side, and it's not going to be your wallet or your budget is not going to be able to save you this time. It's not going to be able to help you out. Okay, it'll help you out a little bit, but not on this one. This is one you guys are going to have to kind of learn and grow. So, all right, guys, that is it. That is the end of the video. So to sum up for you, what size plants are the best to buy? Is bigger always better, right? And the answer, of course, is it depends, right? Just like every other answer to every question. Now, could you put some smaller full sun trees in here and let them grow out into the sun? Well, absolutely, right? Because I've got a pre-established microclimate, right? And really anything will grow here. I mean, little mango seedlings, every single one of those that sprouts, they like to germinate underneath these trees. So I end up with like just this mango forest of trees that I have to go through here and weed out, pull out all these mango trees every year because they just seed and then they germinate and then they grow, and then it's too much of what I don't want. You know, I want very specific trees in here. Okay. All right, guys, I hope this helps you get good trees and get good trees established, and just know that we do the best we can. And sometimes, I mean, if you want that big old tropical tree, I mean, we can get it, but at the same time, do you want it, or are you willing to fight through, one, the purchase price, because the big tropicals are expensive, guys. We're talking 500 on up, 500 on up, okay? If you're wanting larger tropical trees, so you've got a larger investment, right? And sometimes that causes people to take care of their trees more. Obviously, if you're spending $1,000 on a tree or a car, you're going to take care of it a lot better than if you buy a $20 tree or a $20 car, where it's not that big of a deal if you lose that kind of money. But I'm telling you guys, with when it comes to fruit trees, the larger they get, the more money they are. So on average, fruit trees gain $100 a year. So a 1-year tree is $100, a 2-year tree is $200, a 3-year-old tree is $300. And that's because you got to remember that the nursery has had that plant for X amount of years, hopefully. You got to remember some places just bring in plants all the time, but your hope is that you find some places that grow some locally established trees. And I'm telling you, there's places that grow all of these, guys. Everything you see here, every single tree you see here, someone is growing this locally, okay? So now, if you want to start buying big trees, like I said, go ahead. But if you really need to kind of do your research and figure out where they are grown big. Were they grown big here, or were they grown big somewhere else? And that makes a difference on what you put in and what you put in, okay? All right, guys, so hopefully that has answered a lot of your questions, because I get this question all the time, and I see other people do posts on it and videos, and I'm like, oh man, there's a lot of misinformation out there. So let's try to get it a little bit more well known that's how these plants are grown here, guys, and that's the struggles we go through to get you these plants here. Okay, we obviously have a love for this, or there's no way anyone would do this. It's so hot. But we're getting beautiful shade and food and return on investment. All right, guys, that is it for today. The videos are running a little longer nowadays, it seems, but get inside, stay cool, and make sure you water your plants. Water your plants, guys, and hit that smash button and like, and I will see you guys next time. Please subscribe.